Where the heck are we, right? Is that the $1,000,000 question? Synergy Flavors. My flavor partner that I've been working with for a few years, but I've never actually been to their campus. Started working with them during 2020. A bunch of different projects we're working on together, a multitude of clients and things like that, and it just kind of made the perfect, I guess, opportunity to not only work on some of those things, but just to kind of explain, I guess, a whole bunch of like the questions that I typically get from both like new clients, existing clients, even just people from the network industry that I talk to all the time. They're usually kind of a little bit, I guess, I don't say confused, but like they don't maybe know all of the different services, maybe all of the different capabilities, all the different reasons why they would work with a flavor company directly. So my hope with this piece of content is that we'll be able to answer like a ton of questions that I typically get, and ones that maybe even I'm interested to learn a little bit more from the people that do those jobs and are the experts in those particular areas. So this should be a great piece of content for anybody that's trying to, just work through new product development and trying to figure out what are those different kind of levers that they would want to pull, bringing in a flavor company, even maybe contract manufacturers that are thinking about maybe coming or working closer with Synergy. Maybe it gives you a better sense of what they're doing. So this is going to cover a ton of different areas, but we're gonna hopefully bring it to you in a fun, interesting, insightful, impactful, interesting, entertaining. I don't know. I'm going to try to keep busting out these adjectives because hopefully it'll keep your attention a little bit longer. You guys will come on along with us. And companies are coming to me, both ones that are already in business and kind of in market, doing well, and then ones that are kind of pre-revenue or just kind of coming up with ideas. And they're trying to figure out within the supply side, do they want turnkey? Do they want to maybe work with different partners within that process? How would you, I guess, think about when a person is coming up against that in their decision tree and saying, should I just work with a turnkey contract manufacturer, or should I work with a flavor company? Like how would you, I guess, think about approaching that decision?
Yeah, so from my perspective, flavor companies typically work with a variety of different brands directly, and obviously work with a whole host of different contract manufacturers. I think some of the benefits of working directly with a flavor company from the onset is very much geared around ownership and absolutely owning your formula. So typically, when you think about a product, marketeers will put product in market and obviously generate interest from consumers. But ultimately, when you consider why people continue to purchase a product, it really is for the taste of the product. So when you're looking at what we do at Synergy, it's very much geared towards delivering a taste that's engineered specifically for the base. So oftentimes if we're working with, let's say, an energy drink brand, we'll understand what that matrix is, or protein powder, pea protein, plant-based protein. We'll understand what that matrix is, and then we'll customize our modulators to cover up and modify some of the off notes, and then we'll build a flavor on top of it. So it's a very efficient process when you're working directly with a flavor company, because everything is customized and built specifically for that application.
I think when you're looking at, where are the alignment or where's our companies optimizing for certain things? Like if you're working with a flavor company, arguably you're just trying to make the best tasting product out there of that thing, where then all the other kind of I guess areas of concern or things that you'd maybe optimize for are maybe secondary to having this great tasting product. And then when you'd work with maybe a contract manufacturer, or this is nothing kind of against them, is that they're optimizing for a different thing. Maybe they're trying to create something that's super efficient for their supply chain or whatever that is, where I think not to say that they also aren't trying to create the best tasting product, but they obviously have other things within their business that they're also trying to be not only aware of, but maybe even optimize for, that might be misaligned to the customer wanting to just make the best tasting product, which I think working with you guys directly, that's really, you guys are aligned in terms of your motivations.
Well, I think so too. And then contract manufacturers typically will not just work with one flavor company. So they'll have multiple flavor partners. And sometimes there's a risk of, stacking a product with flavor on top of flavor, and then those flavors are potentially competing against each other. Again, when you're working with a flavor company from the onset of a project, The opportunity really is to customize the flavor system specifically for the base. At Synergy, we'll use GCMS data where we'll see what the off notes are, and then we can build a flavor around that. So there's an age-old example of peach, for example, and sulfur being pretty dominant in some base characters. So oftentimes we'll design a flavor that will not have that sulfur character. So that flavor on its own will not necessarily taste like peach. However, when it's combined with the actual base, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. It comes together, and then that flavor will obviously present as a fresh peach flavor with the right amount of sulfur.
And when you're talking, I'm thinking about, if it's, that's obviously a direct benefit, I think, of working with a flavor company, that there's actually a cost savings element that goes into there. You mentioned around like sometimes maybe stacking some of those flavors, and you're not necessarily even maybe understanding that there's a penny here or a penny there that you're actually, kind of creating that you didn't need, that you could have actually created a better tasting flavor for a little bit of a cheaper price point on that side. But think about maybe some other, if it's direct benefits or just indirect benefits of working with a flavor company.
So I think cost is really important. The unit economics for us is something that we want to put on the table right away. So we need to understand what the cost and use parameters are, what the targets are, and we can work towards that cost. So if you're giving us a very specific cost and use, we'll provide you the solutions that are within that cost and use. When we talk about some of the other benefits of what we do, you look at, I guess, the influence of our team. So we have a pretty diverse team here of food scientists and flavorists who work at our company here at Synergy, but ultimately when you see what a typical day is in the life of maybe a food scientist or a beverage application scientist, they can start the day working on a sour confection type application, and then ultimately throughout the day are communicating with people within our beverage group, and then things cross over between different categories. So the idea to maybe work on a sour confection lends itself to working in a beverage application, and suddenly you see the emergence of different flavor trends that are happening within different categories, kind of jumping over and blurring the lines within a different category. So for me, I think at Synergy, just that diversity of thought leadership and experiences really will help brands as they look at kind of where they should go and how to differentiate themselves on the shelf.
Yeah, because I think even from brands, if it's nutrition brands, typically maybe they're thinking about food and beverage applications, how to maybe take their leading pre-workout energy product and take that into an energy drink, or even going in a different direction and thinking about this as maybe some of the biggest large food and beverage conglomerates, and then looking at maybe some of the things that nutrition businesses are doing and saying, how do I do some of that stuff? How do I mask some of these functional ingredients that now need to be in our products or whatever? And I think that you guys having that breadth of knowledge and just insights and being able to work across categories and having so much diversity in terms of the team, they're able to quickly jump around and provide the best solution possible over and this is maybe as a generalist over a specialist scenario, but I think that if you are a deep generalist, you're able to kind of provide value across so many different things that ends up being cumulative and super important over maybe just being, all I do is energy drinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of what we do is obviously cross categories. So, there's every different aspect of that, understanding what the actual matrix of the product is. But then there's also, relationships with the ingredient manufacturers into, let's say, a food product are different than the relationships we'll have with ingredient manufacturers into an energy beverage, for example.
Yeah, just being able, you mentioned just being able to, I guess, have that network effect, or having, you guys work with so many different manufacturers, and you guys work with so many ingredient suppliers, you guys work with, even like myself, so many consultants and all that, is that you guys have such a strong network of people that if somebody's coming up with the challenge, or they're trying to come up with how, what's the best vetted partner, who should I work with, you guys have a lot of that unlock for them, because you guys have worked with everybody. You guys know, who the best of the best is and all these things, and say, hey, here are the couple people that I think you guys should talk to first, because I think that's always a challenge that comes up across the business when you are working in maybe areas that you aren't as confident as you used to be. Like, where do you go? Who do you find? Because, partnerships, especially on the supply chain, when you are trusting a lot of that and you're not self-manufacturing yourself, I mean, that's a huge issue that could hurt you if you work with the wrong partners. So it's great to be able to have that.
I think that the value that is expected from Synergy, in addition to being able to provide taste, is also just a rounded outlook of, you know, where this product fits in the industry. So at times, ironically, I feel that we work as consultants, not paid consultants.
I didn't receive my paycheck this week.
You're gonna have to talk to payroll about that.
When a particular entrepreneur is, or a company in general is looking to work with a flavor company, like how do you guys price things? Like how do you guys, I guess the revenue model, like is it something where you guys develop and have people pay the development costs at Synergy? Is that something that you guys do, or is it something that you guys just work and align yourself with? If the product does well, you know, we're going to be obviously building the flavor system, and then as those units flow, they're going to obviously buy more material.
Yeah, it's very rare that we'll actually charge for development. You know, our focus, I guess our limited resources, our talent in terms of ensuring that we're prioritizing and working on projects that are, you know, most likely those types of projects that are going to be successful in the market. And honestly, it's difficult to pick a winner at every race, but ultimately I think we have a proven track record of selecting brands and entrepreneurs who have been successful. And then for us, there's no charge for development. So typically the base will come to us and we'll engineer against that base. And then for Synergy to be paid, it really is a case of like making sure that we're creating the best tasting product we can create. So we're really invested in the taste of that product, and we're invested in the success of that product. For flavor companies to be successful, it's volume, obviously. So those turns are very important, and then getting to a point where, as you say, those units flow is obviously where our motivation is and what our interest is.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it goes back to that earlier point around making sure that there's an alignment in motivations or just incentives, and making sure that everybody, and this is just, in my mind, another case that works well with alignment, because if you are just charging for development costs, then really you're just looking at it as, am I able to develop product or do the development process profitably? And anything past that point, you know, that's great. And maybe that's not as big of a concern, where you guys are saying, we want to create the best product possible because we want to get this to have the highest velocity in store, and then that is where we're going to ultimately make our money.
Absolutely. But at the same time, like, we understand the need for development companies. So we work with a whole host of different developers across the country and across the world. And, you know, we've got relationships with many of those and like a process with many of those where we will be part of that development. So at times we could be considered part of that developer's IP. And you know, that's a good position for us to be in as well.
Talking about being, you know, selective in the sense of who you guys work with, I guess the next question for me, if I was an entrepreneur, I'm trying to understand, like, how do I think about when the best timing is to work with a flavor company? Is it a size of a company? Is it a timing within the development cycle? I mean, how should a entrepreneur think about that approach?
Ultimately, I think the key is that there is that collaborative partnership. So as early in the process is probably best. Ideally, we'd like to work with people who've got a well fleshed out or well developed business plan with various attributes of the product and what helps differentiate their product in the market. But as early in the process is probably the best time to come to Synergy and to talk to us a little bit about how you're expecting your product to perform and what that taste should be.
So don't come in like green right off the streets that don't know anything about it.
Yeah, we've had that, you know, we've had that, Josh, and we've, you know, some of our most successful customers today have picked up the phone.
So you just never know.
You never know.
I was thinking about all the development projects that I've been a part of in the last, 12-ish years in nutrition and like food and beverage space or whatever. And I've always had this like archaic way of doing it where I tell whoever the manufacturer is, like, send me the base. I want to taste it. though I might not have the best palate ever, I go, okay, I pick up on little notes here, there, whatever. And then in my mind, then I go, okay, how will those notes work well with, say, certain flavors, or maybe certain like combo flavors, if it's like a cherry limeade or whatever, you know, those two things maybe play off or whatever. And that's how I've always like approached it. But again, that's probably super archaic and maybe not the best way to approach it. There's probably a much better way, right?
Sure. I mean, that approach is, for a long time, Synergy has utilized our team of expert flavor chemists, application scientists to do a similar approach, whereby we receive the protein base from a customer, and then it's all about using the knowledge to determine what flavor profiles and combinations will work well with that base. In recent years, we have invested pretty significantly in our advanced analytical capabilities, which you can see here in this lab. Now, more recently, the approach we're taking is applying those techniques. So we're looking at solvent-assisted flavor evaporation, gas chromatography, high-performance liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, gas chromatography olfactometry, which is a nose cone, whereby we're taking in the base. We're doing a full in-depth analysis of the volatile profile to really understand what's in that base, and then providing that data to our flavor chemists and our application scientists so that they can determine, like I said, which flavor profiles will work well with this base, equally importantly, which profiles will not work well with the base, and then tailoring flavors specifically for that base.
So it cuts down on a lot of maybe back and forth. Like if you're working with the flavor company, you're going to be able to maybe dial in those things much quicker, or maybe at a more refined level than, say, if you're working with, you know, somebody from the maybe on the contract manufacturing side that is, you know, has some handle on flavoring, understands things, but maybe they don't necessarily know that a certain flavor that maybe a customer wanted is not going to work. They're just going to go, oh, let's try it out, let's try it. You're going to say straight off, that's not going to work. Or maybe there's a low probability that that's going to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the time, working with a co-man, they're limited somewhat in working with off-the-shelf flavors. So they'll take a strawberry, for example, and if you're putting that in a pea protein base, which is high in hexanal, which is an aldehyde which imparts green, freshly cut grass type aroma, then you may over-accentuate those notes in your flavor.
Wow.
So the approach we'll take is we'll look at the base, identify it's high in hexanal and 5 or 6 other characterizing compounds, and then actually reduce the level of those compounds within the base to create a more balanced profile.
Does a lot of the customers that you guys work with, do they like to get into the weeds like that? Do they like to understand a lot of that, or do you have a lot of people that are hands off?
I'd say it's a mix. So we like to provide the information and the rationale behind the flavor development. I'd say 50% of the time the customer is just interested in hitting the right profile, and then the other 50% the customer likes to know, what is driving the profile of their base, because that actually helps them as well on their end to customize and get the best base possible. Synergy has invested pretty significantly in our advanced analytical capabilities. So gas chromatography is our go-to instrument. The instrument in front of us is a gas chromatography with a flame ionization detector, which allows you to tell how much of an ingredient, how much of a volatile compound is in there, how much of each volatile. A mass spectrometer, which will tell you what the compound is. So it'll essentially separate 1, 2, 300 different volatile compounds, tell you how much of each of those compounds is in there and what they are. More recently, what we've added is an ODP, so gas chromatography olfaction, is where you can actually sensorially evaluate the compound, so sniff it as it's eluting from the GC. So you can determine of the 100, 200, 300 compounds, which are really characterizing of the profile. So you may come away and pick out, of the 200 or 300 volatile compounds, there's 10 or 15 which are really driving flavor.
That's interesting. It's like the details of all this is crazy. I don't know. I don't know if people really truly understand the detail that goes into all this. It's like, the product gets on the shelf and it tastes great. And I think that these last, I would say 5 to 7 years, especially when you're talking about, all these functional ingredients, the ability of like flavor scientists or I always say like flavor artistry, has really been, I think, the proponent of all of the growth. Is like, there's a lot of really, I would say, like nasty ingredients that for whatever reason, for the longest time, people were like, oh, well, we'll accept this because the functionality is great, so the taste doesn't need to be what we're really wanting. Now you can have both great taste and the functionality, and it's because of all of this, you guys or whatever that's doing that. It's amazing that that's like been able to be done, because again, like I've tasted a lot of these bases and I'm like, I don't know how it's possible that all of a sudden it gets turned into this like great tasting products, because a lot of times I'm like, I don't know how you do it. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And this is coming from like a business brain guy that,
by all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
all the things you're saying, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have probably taken a lot more science classes in college, guys. Because I don't know all the details of it. I know enough to be dangerous in this industry, but I don't know it to even the 1/100th of the where you're at. So,
And for a long time, the flavor industry was very much art and insight based. But I think in the last decade or so, the science and technology has really ramped up.
I love that.
So it's allowed us to develop those products to your
I love that. I love that. In terms of flavor matching, maybe the question that I've gotten a ton is that they think of maybe flavor matching first through maybe a more negative lens, where they're already in market. They maybe have either hit a supply chain issue where they have to maybe change some things around and they need to kind of figure out how to swap out an ingredient and then sustain that same flavor, or they have been maybe working with a third-party manufacturer and then all of a sudden they want to work with another one, but that third-party manufacturer unfortunately owns the formulation or owns the flavor, and they go, well, how do we do this? So maybe talk through both sides of it in the sense of like, I mean, maybe it's just all one holistic answer to this, but just in terms of how you guys approach, when a particular customer is looking to flavor match.
So like, those are really great examples, right? So like right now we're having an orange crisis. I don't know if you know that, a citrus crisis, because we have the greening of the citrus trees that are happening.
Is this
like
Florida's fault?
Florida.
No.
Well,
Florida man, that was his fault.
Florida man accused of throwing corn on the cob at his mom during Memorial Day weekend.
it's a fungus that is,
I didn't know that.
starting to kill. And if you notice, like this, even the citrus that you get in the stores, it doesn't have the same look to it and stuff. And like,
I'm not paying attention enough right now. That's my problem. I was like, I'm still trying to come off the egg crisis, and now we're moving into orgies.
And I think maybe us as consumers, like in the produce section, aren't seeing as great as an impact. But if they don't have the oranges, we don't get orange oils. And so then that trickles down into supply chain. And if we can't get the orange oils, or if they're really expensive now, and now you as, my customer, now you're going to pay triple what you were paying for your flavor. What are some options that I can give to you? So I can try to go and look at that orange oil and understand the components that, have a part in like the character of it, and add those back individually to see if I can get you more cost effective, but not affect your label either, right? So that's like a big thing. We have to stay within the regulations that you're trying.
Yeah, because it's not just a cost thing. Sometimes it's going to be label compliance.
Right.
It could also be maybe certification compliance.
Correct.
Wherever.
Yeah, and if you have any like experience with packaging is very expensive, right? And so if you make a label change and then you have to go down and change all of your packaging, that's a huge implication for most of our customers. So yeah, that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is like, let's say you go to Starbucks and you love their pink drink, but now you want to develop your own product that has that same profile. So that's still flavor matching, right? But now we're going to market it in a different way. Or like if you're trying to co-brand with like a Dr. Pepper or like Nerds, that kind of thing, you have to match that flavor because they won't co-brand with you unless it meets their standards. But then you have to, get it to work into a different application as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big trend. I'll speak just through like as the nutrition lens, but a lot of that, brand partnership licensing of the flavor IP, and bringing that into sometimes powdered products or beverage, if it's through a different lens, like an energy drink or something like that. This is your job to try to match all that up, which is
we get that all the time.
A lot of the easiest things. The other thing you were mentioning about, like, if it's Starbucks or just this inspiration thing, and I know I've done this to a lot of people before, is that I have in my head, because I had a white trash diet growing up, and it's like I think about things through like these nostalgic snacks and just fast food restaurants.
Ding dong.
When I'm thinking about products, that's how I go and I describe it to people. Like, I want it to taste like this. And I've even went to the point where I will send, like, if it's Uber Eats or something, I'll send something to the lab because I want them, if they haven't had it or whatever. Have you had anybody that's ever, like, put you on just a hunt of trying to find, like,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that definitely happens all the time. And that's one of the reasons why we bring in new products too, right? Like, what's the trend? And typically you see the trend start in beverage because people will pay more money for a beverage than they will for a box of cereal, right? So, like, you'll see the trends in beverage, and then we'll eventually see those profiles cross over into, like, baked goods, or, like you said, performance nutrition is another place where people will pay a little bit more money, and then it goes down.
Have those been tough? A lot of creating, or I guess matching flavors from ones that are either, basic confectionery products, or we talk about like a carbonated soft drink or something that's just a pretty basic, I guess, formula, a lot of sugar, a lot of maybe corn syrup or whatever that is, and then taking that and then trying to keep the same flavor, but then having to mask dozens of, like, just nasty active performance ingredients. Has that been like a tough transition?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so every flavor is application dependent. So you could have a berry flavor and you put it into a beverage, an alcoholic beverage. And you're like, oh my gosh, it performs so well, but it's because it has synergies with that base. Take that flavor, now you're going to put it into a cupcake, and it's completely different profile because you now have interactions and synergies with this other base. So that's sort of where we come into, like, customizing as a flavor house, right? That's my job, is now I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to think about the mouthfeel. I'm going to think about, like you said, the masking. What type of base am I going into? Grains have off notes. And then, of course, don't get started on all the supplements and stuff like that we have to sort of neutralize the base. And so
what's, I guess, this all sounds very technical in the sense, or like just super difficult. Like, what was the process in terms of you getting your certification as was it flavor scientist? Is that
we're flavor chemists.
Flavor chemists.
Right.
Now, I have another question before we get into this one. Sometimes I will say that you guys are flavor artists, and it's not to say that you guys don't use a lot of science and analytical skills, but for me, I feel like there's an artistry that goes involved with creating these things, because you could ultimately do the most boring things possible, but to push all of this forward and being that taste is king, like, you have to have some creativity, artistry, like there has to be like, I was thinking about creativeness is not just painting or the typical mediums that people think about. I also think this goes involved with creating flavors. So I don't know if that's, like, sometimes when I say these things, I'm like, am I being, like, derogatory towards the people? Like, because I use these terms more from, like, a loving way, but I don't know if it comes off like what people say.
I mean, I think it's 100% creativity, right? So, like, you could make a strawberry flavor and I could make a strawberry flavor, use the same materials, but it's so much like any recipe that you follow. You're making a cake, I'm making a cake, chocolate, right? But then there's, like, this array of chocolate that could come in. Same thing with the flavors, where I could maybe add a little more green and you could add a little more seedy or jammy, and we're using the same materials, but we're going to get different flavor profiles. Another thing to know is there's over 4,000 materials that we can use in our flavors. So, and there's a list, right? It's issued by the, FEMA, and it's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe, that we have to follow. So, like, all of the materials that we use in our flavors are GRAS. And then that list is constantly changing. Every 2 years, they republish a new one, and we have to follow that. But yeah, I mean, we have essential oils, we have aroma chemicals, we have solid extracts, liquid extracts that we can use in our flavors. So there's over 4,000 ways that we can make a flavor.
How many could you name off the top of your head? No, I'm just kidding. No, I want 1 through 4,000. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's the other reason why it takes so long, right? Like, you have to start to really understand. And there's a lot of the ones that are basic, right, that we use in everything. But then there's, like, the little nuances that we can use.
What is go through care. Like the schooling and, I guess, I want to say, like, the vocational, like, apprentice side of it. Like, can you go through that to make people understand, like, absolutely, just how long this all takes to become Is it 500?
500 in the U.S. that are
How many
certified.
sommeliers are there? Is there less than or more than that? Is that like another
I
one
don't
where
know,
people
yeah.
are like in their head? Like that's like a real.
I mean, that's the same.
But you guys are like
concept,
the
right?
sommeliers of all flavors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what
Well,
those
we
wine
do have
people
we
does.
do have savory flavors and sweet. So I'm considered a sweet
Okay,
flavorist.
okay.
So I don't do a lot of like what they call processed flavors. So it's different. That's the other half of our
Okay,
building. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to
Yeah.
go over there, but for us, we deal with what we call sweet.
So what's that process?
So my background, I have a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry,
Okay.
and most people in our industry will have that. Now there are some that don't, right? Because it's an apprenticeship, so you don't necessarily have to have a science degree. You know, like
So there's a chance for me.
yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah.
All right.
And most of us just fall into it because there's no exposure. Right? Like we are trying to go into schools and talk to kids and teach them, you know, what flavor science really is all about and food science and stuff to expose them. But most of us just sort of fall into it. We don't know that it's a thing that exists. So anyway, most of us have 4-year degrees. Let's just say most of us have science background, right? And then you go work for a company and you have to be accepted into a flavors and training program. It's not just like, oh yeah, you're going to do this,
Yeah.
right? So you have to apply and you have to get letters of recommendation, and
Wow.
you have to usually do like some sort of exam, and then you have like an interview and that kind of thing that you're going to apply for a program. And then once you're in the program, your first 5 years are really mapped out most of the time.
Okay.
So like your first year, you're just compounding and you're just, everything is smelling. You're tasting and you're smelling, you're tasting, you're smelling. And then as time goes on, you're also preparing for your test, because we have like a 10-page syllabus that we have to, again, memorize most of those materials. And then we have regulatory things, and we have, you know, just things that we have to be able to problem solve. And then we go in front of a board and we take a written exam. It's a 60-minute written exam, typically about 30 questions. And then that goes to the panelists, and then they can extract any more information that they need from you. And then they put you up for recommendation to vote you into the Society of Flavor Chemists.
Wow.
And that's 5 years. And then 2 years later, you get to do that whole thing all over again, but it's a little more intense. Because they have to make sure that you can problem solve too, right?
Wow.
Because you're my employer. You want me to be able to problem solve
Yeah.
and, you know, like, oh, we do have an orange crisis. So now, Jackie, guess what? You get to figure that out. So you need me to have
Yeah.
the abilities to do that. And then also manufacturing.
Wow.
Can we scale up? Can I go to a customer? Can I speak with the customer and help them solve any issues they have? So.
It's crazy. That's just like, I mean, I love to hear the growth, the depth and the breadth of like the knowledge base that you have to have. Especially, I think these last couple of years, it probably became extremely important with what you were mentioning. If it's supply chain, if it's what problem solving. I mean, it's really
Right.
a matter of like, you know, on my side, on the business side, and this is an overgeneralization, but I think a lot of times for the last 10 years before 2020, it was like a little bit of like Goldilocks, like things were going well, everything was
Yeah.
like working the way it was
Yeah.
supposed to go, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
these last couple of years it seems like we're just chasing a different challenge that we're
Yes.
solving. It's like we go to one thing, we fight that fire, we move to the next thing, we
Yep.
fight that fire, we move to the
Absolutely.
next thing. So it's great to kind of hear just that's a central task that you guys have to kind of take on and,
Yep.
and be a part of your kind of ethos is like, we're going to solve these problems.
Yeah.
We're going to figure this out because
Can I like go pull some materials, and I want to see if you can guess, like, we have what they
Yes.
call, can I do
I don't
that?
know.
Okay,
I don't know where this
so
is going, but
we
I know where
have-
Grant's already like shaking his head. He's like, yes, do
We
that.
have materials that we call, they're like identifiers basically,
Yeah.
or like like a standard of identity that you would put like, yeah, if I smell this, I know it's for that flavor. And then we have support materials, right? So
Okay.
I would like to maybe just, if you give me like 10 minutes,
Yeah.
because I have to go back to the room and pull some stuff out. What do
Yeah.
you think?
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you just smell the cap. Be careful. Like, don't stick it up there. Just kind of waft it a little bit.
Masking, not like facial masks, but masking of nutritional products. Out of any of the product categories in nutritional supplements, which one is the worst to have to
Which
work
one is
with?
the worst?
Yeah.
Oh God, probably any of the weird, new, exciting vegan blends that we get.
Okay, you're actually the second person that's answered that question. So I feel like that's like everybody's just like hatred. No offense to anybody that's the vegan protein suppliers out there, but
No, it's just generally they don't come to us if it's good in the first place, because we're actually very good at masking. We have a lot of tools for that, so that's something I end up working on a lot. Because we'll get the weirdest stuff, from mushrooms to bugs to.
I was gonna say, yeah. Do you get any of that kind of stuff, like the cricket proteins?
Yeah,
is that starting to pick up?
I don't know if it's starting to pick up. People are trying to make it pick up, but I don't
It's definitely
know.
for Americans. I don't think we want to have cricket protein or whatever other kind of bug protein, but maybe some other parts of the world would be into it. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't want to drink it. It's better in a chip form.
So explain a little bit around like just the flavor masking process, I guess, of like how do you neutralize some of these like, you know, different herbals, or even I guess like if it comes in premix over like individual ingredients, like how do you approach that process as a whole?
Well, first thing we do is we're gonna taste the protein on its own, no sweeteners, no adjustments, see where that is. We'll just make a list of like, okay, this is very green, this is super swampy, maybe it's earthy, mushroomy. And then I just keep a list of all of our different maskers and what I've used to mask a green note or a mushroomy note, or just maybe a weird Play-Doh note. And I have a whole list of that, so we'll try my first instinct, we'll see where those go. If we can't fully mask it, then our main choice is to lean into it. So if something's really earthy, I'll try to grab a chocolate that doesn't have the earthy notes in it, and then we'll just use that earthy as the earthy part of the chocolate. So we'll build something, if it's a really green pea protein, I might grab a strawberry with no green notes at all, so then we'll just highlight the green notes for that, because if there's any green notes in it in the first place, it comes off way too strong and off balance.
I like that. And I think that like, how long has it taken you to get a handle on some of that, like in understanding how to play off of certain things?
Oh God, that probably took me a good year of just playing around with it to really understand it. Because when you first start out, you're just like, oh, let's throw in some extra stevia, or like a cream note and hope that covers it. It just takes a long time to really get the nuances of all of them. And then when you get something new and exciting, then you get to do it all over again.
Are you always looking at, I guess, like iteratively, like how do you improve from things you've done in the past? Like you're like, oh, like you mentioned before, like you've approached maybe the problem or the challenge before, and you're like, okay, I know generally what I'm trying to accomplish, but then after you've hit that, like, does that now condition you, like, I need to do better, or is it always like, let's just try to, you know, see the same level?
That depends on the amount of time we're given.
Yeah.
If something's a really quick turnaround, we'll get it to 80% of the way there. I can get there in a day, but if you really want to get to the completely masked, or 95 to 100%, that might take me a couple weeks.
The only thing I was thinking of was, and Grant knows, like there's this famous picture of this like horse where it's talking about a designer, and it's like the horse at the beginning is like so great, and then like it just like falls off because like the budget of the whatever, it's like they wanted it to be good. That's how I'm thinking in my head of like, if you had infinite time and infinite budget to like be able to handle it, then you'd be able to obviously just knock these things out of the park. But there's obviously constraints that go into different things, if it's a cost side or if it's a time side or whatever, which does those things ever frustrate you at all?
Sometimes. A lot of the times, if like I can get you something really, really good, it might be a little bit outside of your price range. So we'll show them the really good stuff, and then show them stuff that's in their price range that's maybe not as good, and be like, okay, is there any wiggle room in your price, or is this what you want? We'll see what we can do.
People maybe don't know that there's actually something that is way better than what they actually were expecting or wanted, and maybe it's within the stretch of their budget to be able to handle it. So I actually like your approach to it, because I think you do need to tell people, like, here's your kind of maybe your levels, and kind of maybe, I don't want to say push it more, but at least put them in a direction so they have frames of reference of like, this could be, you know, is that a trade-off I want to make or not? Is this a, you know, do I feel like that's so much better that penny or two pennies make a difference? You know, like you have to kind of put that in your brain, because if you don't know those things even exist, or the ability for you to get to that level even exists, like I feel like it would be a disservice to them. So I actually like that approach. Say you're having a conversation with somebody, maybe they don't know what you do or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, you know, this is the product I take and I love it, it's so great or whatever, and then you're like, I haven't tried that yet, or maybe you have, and you're like, ooh, that's not that good. Like, I actually can kick that product's butt every day of the week.
Right.
Like, do you, like then you feel, then you like you look at them a little bit differently. You're like,
It's like,
your palate's not very good.
Yeah, sometimes.
you're not anywhere near the top of the class of this product category.
What really hurts is when they're like, oh, I really love this, and I'm like, I made that, but I can't tell you.
Oh yeah, that's
that's always super fun.
We were talking to, when it was mentioned to Jackie, and I said, do you have these like star babies you've birthed, these products that are just amazingly tasted and whatever, and then you don't get to tell anybody, but yet they're like the world loves them, and you're just like secretly you're like smile every time somebody's like talking about it, but yet you can't really say that it was you that had like a big part of it.
It's like, oh, I did that. That's. I'm glad it's doing well. I just wish I could tell someone.
Yeah, I feel for you on that one, because I'm on the other side where like sometimes I'll develop brands, concepts, and everything from start to finish, and they'll be taken by an entrepreneur and they go, and I can't say that I built any of these ones. So then these companies sometimes become very big, and their entrepreneurs are like, you know, I did, and honestly they did a ton of things, but I'm also like, oh, I don't even get a mention in this. It's the story, the origin story doesn't even include me. You're like, okay, that's fine. I'll just put it to my grave. Maybe we'll put it on my gravestone. Helped create. The NDAs are gone because I'm dead, so it doesn't matter, right? Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, I guess, behind the scenes or inside look of a flavor company, just kind of the massive scale of company that, you know, both manufactures and does development work, analytical work, both on the sweet and the savory, and they work across every single product category you could think of. It's a ton of little intricacies and little steps and just nuance to everything that even me working alongside them for the last several years didn't know about. I'm kind of learning about all these other kind of levels to this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing that through our lens.